Welcome to the True Crime Never Sleeps podcast. I'm your host, Eyler. Today, on another episode of Shit Out of Luck, we dive into the capture of Larry Eyler. But first, we'd like to thank our sponsor, Poddex, for sponsoring this episode. Check them out today at poddex.com. Use the promo code Larry21 for 10% off your order. And as always, if you want to leave us a message about the show, current episode, previous episode, want to tell us something we got wrong, got right, you can send us a voicemail at 682-305-0483. And as always, if you like, you can remain anonymous. Let's dive into today's episode. In the spring of 1983, investigators in Lake County, Illinois, were working the separate case of two young men who had been brutally stabbed to death and left with their pants pulled down. Because of how the men were killed when they were found, police considered a possible link between the homicides. Detectives were able to determine the name of only one victim. Using fingerprints, they identified 26-year-old Gustavo Herrera, who investigators learned was known to go to gay bars to solicit sex. In August 1983, the body of another man who had been stabbed and left with his pants down was found in the same area. Investigators collected evidence at this crime scene, including tire tracks and boot prints. Detectives found a wallet with a woman's ID in it. She identified the victim as 28-year-old Ralph Khalil. Officials followed various leads in search for a connection linking the three victims. They discovered that officials in Kankakee County were investigating the case of a man stabbed 27 times. His body was found with his pants down in October 1982 in a rural area on the Illinois-Indiana state line. He was identified as Stephen Crockett, a 19-year-old Chicago resident who had been arrested for male prostitution. Detectives learned that Indiana officials were also working cases of men being stabbed to death and dumped half undressed in desolate areas. Quote, "We had homicide cases from 1982 all the way through August of 1983. The bodies had been dumped off major interstates or highways. We had a serial murder with multiple bodies stacking up in 2 states," Detective Daniel Collin in the Lake County Sheriff's Office told Oxygen. The murderer became known as the Highway Killer. Investigators focused on 23-year-old Indiana victim Stephen Egan, who had been stabbed 23 times. His body was found in an abandoned barn where investigators discovered a government key marked "Do Not Duplicate." They established a 2-state task force along with a tip hotline and built a profile of the killer based on his unique habit of stabbing to the point of overkill and leaving his victims with their pants down. The task force did a press release and put out flyers that there may be a possible homosexual serial killer. ABC7 Chicago said, one hotline call raised the name of Larry Eyler. In 1978, according to the tipster, Eyler had stabbed a young male hitchhiker after the two had sex. The victim escaped and Eyler was arrested, but the case was dropped. The victim didn't want to be identified as gay. Investigators looked into Eyler's background. They learned that he was 32 years old and part of the gay community. He was working in a liquor store in Terre Haute, Indiana, and regularly drove to Indianapolis and Chicago. Eyler's drive would be along U.S. Route 41, which matched areas where bodies were found. After a traffic stop, Eyler was brought in for questioning. He allowed authorities to search his truck, where a bloody knife, boots, ropes, and handcuffs were found. An impression was taken of the vehicle's tire. Because there was no reason to hold him, Eyler was released. Authorities still had the knife, boots, and tire tread impression, which were found to match the prints at the Ralph Khalil crime scene. They obtained a search warrant for Eyler's residence, where nothing was found to connect him to any murder. When questioned by detectives, Eyler was open about his own sexuality, but denied killing anyone. He was released, but kept under surveillance by authorities. Then, FBI crime lab analysis of the knife and boots from Eyler's truck found that blood on them matched Khalil's. It was finally enough to issue an arrest warrant. On October 23, 1983, Eyler was arrested in Lake County, Illinois for the murder of Ralph Khalil, but Eyler's attorney was able to get the boot, knife, and tire print deemed inadmissible in court. Eyler was released. A year later, a Chicago janitor found the dismembered body of 16-year-old Danny Bridges, who was identified by fingerprints in a trash bag. A witness said that the person who put the bag in the garbage lived in an apartment that turned out to be Eyler's residence. Eyler was there with his lover when authorities arrived. Blood found at the scene matched that of Bridges. Eyler was charged with Bridges' murder, and the trial began in July 1986. He was found guilty and sentenced to death. While authorities were relieved that Eyler wouldn't be able to kill again, they believed he was responsible for murdering numerous other men. 4 years after Eyler's conviction, Indiana investigators reopened the Stephen Agin murder case. At the time of Agin's murder, Eyler worked part-time for a government agency. Officials determined that the key recovered from the Agin crime scene opened the door to the office where Eyler worked. In December 1990, Eyler confessed to Agin's murder. He was sentenced to 60 years. On March 6, 1994, Eyler died of AIDS at the Illinois State Penitentiary. 4 days later, his lawyer Kathleen Zellner, who said that Eyler's crimes were connected to his rage, held a news conference. She then released names of men Eyler had confessed to killing. Among the names released were those of Ralph Calise, Gustavo Herrera, and Irvin Gibson, the 16-year-old John Doe found 11 years earlier in the woods in Lake County, Illinois. If you want to support the show, consider buying us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/TCNS. Your support will help the channel grow, upgrade our equipment, bring in new writers, hosts, and create new shows. And we also hope to one day be able to afford to travel to true crime locations and record episodes from those locations. But until then, we work with what we got, and we thank you for supporting and the show and watching and listening. As always, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. And if you want to check out more videos, look right up here is another good one, and over here is another good video. And as always, hit that subscribe button right there.